Hi guys, it's Shanae and welcome back to my channel, and today we are continuing with the read along for ErHa Volume 7. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. YouTube is doing something very weird, which means that sometimes I can't see what's going on with the live stream and sometimes I can. So I'm hoping it won't affect anything. I hope the audio is okay because I had a little bit of trouble checking it because of how weird YouTube is being. Um, but yeah, I hope the audio is still okay. So yeah, I honestly am a little bit nervous for today. But before we get into anything, before I forget, because like the ADHD is strong with these kinds of things. Happy Pride Month. I hope everyone has an amazing month ahead. Hope you've had a lot of fun so far. I know I'm 6 days late, so sorry about that. But yes, Happy Pride Month. I hope it's a great one. And thank you. Hi. Sorry. Scattered brain. Um, if you're new here, hi, I'm Janae. I am unfortunately a very unorganized person. We take 10-minute breaks on the hour uh, for each reading session that we do. We're reading ErHa Volume 7. And what else is there? Oh, today we're doing 2 hours instead of 3 hours because I usually do 3 hours, but I figured that there would be too many pages left to read for 3 hours and too little pages to have, another stream dedicated to this next week. So we're doing 2 hours today and then another 2 hours on Friday, and then we should actually have gotten through volume 7, which is terrifying because Meatbun has a tendency to just like pack so many things into a volume. It's insane to think where we started this volume, and I'm terrified for what lies ahead before we finish this volume. We don't have that much time left, and yet she just somehow manages to do a lot with it. So I'm honestly scared. I don't know what to expect. I'm also busy with the reread. I'm currently on volume 4, and there was just mention of Master Huizue asking Chuaning to go to the mountain to have his little problem sorted out, and at the point that that was happening, we didn't know what his little problem was, and now I'm like, did he fix it for Chuaning without us knowing before Moran came, or did he die before he could fix whatever the little problem was? The little problem that I don't actually think was just a little problem. We'll see. We'll see. I have coffee here with me so that I can keep myself hydrated as we go, and I think that's more or less it. I hope that's it. Oh, also, please be mindful of spoilers. I prefer not to find out anything before I have physically read it with my own eyes. Um, so any like hints of foreshadowing, anything like that, please, keep it off of the chat. Cause it just kind of ruins the experience. Okay, let us get going. So we were on page 297 for anyone who wants to follow along with their physical copies, chapter 238. Soulless. That sounds very foreboding, and I don't think they're talking about Chuaning because, as we found out, he has multiple souls. Okay, we finished off with this piece of wood could be used to create a living person, which I think kind of is implying that Chuaning is actually the dead son of Chushun, but I'm not sure if I got that right. We'll see. What? Moran blurted, reeling back. If not for the fact that he was an apparition, he might have already stumbled into the nets of the fishing vessel next to them. The Flame Emperor's sacred tree could be used to construct a person. Nuwa's clay, Fuxin's chin, and the Flame Emperor's tree are the three holy instruments the deities use to create the world. Ooh, love that more. Their spiritual energy is pure beyond measure. The first immortals, with all their limitless power, were made from these instruments. I had obtained only a tiny portion of the Flame Emperor's tree, but even without a deity's awesome strength, I could easily create a person out of it. In the end, I made up my mind. Just as Neja's teacher reconstructed the god's body from its lotus roots after his death, I could carve this piece of wood into the likeness of the young Chugongzi. Moran felt the world was spinning before his eyes. Huaizhui would carve the wood into the young Chugongzi, into Chulan. I wanted to give my savior back his son. Oh, if what we're reading into this is what is actually true, could you imagine the pain and sorrow that Shushan would have felt had he met Chuaning in the underworld? Oh, that hurts. Moran's throat was dry, as though something was lodged in it. After a long pause, he muttered, "Impossible." Within the memory scroll, the evening bell tolled. Wubei Temple was cloaked in the red of sunset. Weary crows had returned to their nests, and monks passed beneath the colonnade with the sleeves of their loose robes floating behind them. Master Huaizhui sat in one of the rooms within the monastery, the door and windows securely shut. In the pale glow of an oil lamp, beneath the shadow of the Buddha, he whittled with painstaking care. He knew every cut would be impossible to undo. Before touching the wood of the sacred tree, he'd carved hundreds of models, practicing until his creations looked exactly like the Chulan he remembered. Okay, I mean, I'm glad that he didn't just, plow into it. He was very, very thorough beforehand. On this night, he finally held the wood of the sacred tree in his hands. After looking over it carefully a last time, he made the first cautious and considerate cut. Wood shavings drifted down, coating the floor in golden dust. He poured all of himself into each stroke of the knife, envisioning those two figures from his past. 100 years of memories ebbed and flowed beneath his knife. The old monk's head hung low, as though the weight of his sins had snapped his neck long ago. I entered seclusion within the temple. It took me 5 years to finish carving Chulan. Moran walked stiffly over to Huaizhui. As the monk set down the knife, he had made his final cut. He brushed away the last specks of bright dust. Huaizhui touched the wooden child's face and clothes with shaking hands. Tears ran down his face as he knelt, kowtowing to it over and over. Moran turned his stunned gaze to the small sculpture on the tea table. Its tiny form was carved from the sacred tree, using a blade animated by guilt. Ooh! Why is that so hard-hitting? It looked just like Chuaning had as a child. The evening bell began to toll once more. Only... Okay, sorry, I'm just thinking back to the scene at the Feather Tribe, and it's hurting in an entirely new and different way. Let's try this again. The evening bell began to toll once more. Only a blood-red thread still stretched between earth and sky. The last ray of dust murky light passed through the window and landed on the table. The low tones of the bell echoed through the temple grounds. Elsewhere, in the monastery, the monks were burning cypress boughs and pine needles. A note of cool sharpness cut through the rich fragrance of the wood smoke. Sitting in this hall as the bell sounded its final note, surrounded by twilight serenity, Baizhui gazed upon the wooden figure and murmured in a stroke of inspiration, "I'll call you Chuaning." Oh, this hurts. Oh my goodness, okay. Waning, evening peace. He bit his fingertip to draw blood. A single red drop, replete with metal elemental spiritual energy, fell onto the wood, and a flash of brilliant light flooded the room. No, you're not gonna do that to me. Metal elemental because of the blood, and wood because that's what he's made of? Oh, thank goodness frickin' Moran from the past life did not know this, because okay. Moran shut his eyes against the radiance, his lashes trembling. He squinted towards the light, trying to see what was happening, but between the tears blurring his vision and the blinding brightness, he couldn't make out a thing. When the light grew so brilliant he was forced to close his eyes again, Moran's one wild thought was that Chuaning had already seen all of this. How much pain had it caused him? He wasn't human. He had no parents to speak of. He was nothing but a chunk of wood and a drop of blood. He had spent more than 3 decades upon the earth, fully in the dark about his origins. And now Chuaning, like comparing himself to a tree in the forest, withstanding all the winds for everyone else, just takes on a whole new meaning, a whole new, very painful meaning. The sacred tree retained its own spiritual energy. After I gave my sculpture life with a drop of blood, it looked like Chulan in every respect, just as I had hoped. I raised him in the monastery and taught him as my disciple. As he grew older, he began to ask me about his origins. Ran saw Chuaning as a child, sitting beside Huaijue with a stick of red Tanghulu. Shizun, you always say you found me in the snow and brought me back here, but where exactly did you find me? Huaijue was gazing at the cool shadows of the mountains in the distance. After a lengthy pause, his reply came like a sigh. The nun. This hurts. Oh no! The beautiful imagery. You can't hurt me like this. So I'm from the nun? But I've never left the monastery. I don't know what the nun is like. Chuaning looked dismayed. Shizun, I want to go down the mountain and see the outside. I want to see the nun. The illusion darkened, and the courtyard of Wubei Temple was replaced with the lush scenery of Jiangnan. It was June, and the fragrant lotus flowers stood tall and vivid against the green and blue of the water. Chuaning, still a head shorter than Shasini, was skipping down a paved bluestone path. Huaijue followed a few steps behind him. Huaning, slow down. Be careful not to trip. Chuaning turned and flashed his teacher a smile. Moran had never seen such an innocent and carefree expression on his face. Okay, I'll listen to Shizun. The child wore a dusty green monk's robe. His head wasn't shaved. He wore his hair coiled in a little bun, and a lotus leaf was perched atop his head. The drops of dew glistening on the leaf made his face look all the purer and brighter. Hydrae caught up to Chuaning and took his hand. All right, now you've seen Westblake. Where do you want to go next? Can we eat? In that case, Hydrae paused. Let's go into the city. The pair entered the city hand in hand, Moran keeping pace beside them. As he watched Chuaning, crowned with a lotus leaf, head barely rising to Moran's thigh, Moran's heart swelled with pain and tenderness. He extended a hand. He knew he couldn't touch the illusion, but he couldn't stop himself from reaching out to pat Chuaning on the head. At the same moment, Chuaning stopped in his tracks. This is painful. Okay, before we go to the next page, let me just show you the beautiful illustration that crushed my soul. Chuaning before the trauma hits? Yeah. What's wrong? Hydrae asked gently. Chuaning tilted his face up. His eyes, like twin pools of sweet dew in the sunlight, landed unerringly on Moran. Moran froze in astonishment, pulse pounding in his ears. He knew Chuaning couldn't possibly be looking at him, yet a quiet vision of excitement rippled through him. What's that? Chuaning let go of Hydrae's hand and walked towards Moran. Moran's anguish compounded. He'd never seen Chuaning so cheerful, nor his eyes so bright. He found himself leaning down and opening his arms to embrace the child, but Chuaning stepped right through him. Moran blinked, then turned. Chuaning was making for a pastry stall behind him. Head tilted back to see over the counter, he watched the shopkeeper open a bamboo steamer to reveal the pale pink flower-shaped cakes wreathed in steam. Moran let out a breath of relief, but his heart sank ever so slightly. So it had been a coincidence, nothing more. He followed Hydrae to the store. Chuaning was smiling up at his teacher. You know, generally I would have been like, oh yeah, total coincidence. But because Moran said it, now I'm paranoid, because Meat Bun always likes to deflect things as coincidences and then it turns out not to be. Shizun, these cakes look so yummy. Do you want to try one? Can I? Surprise flitted across Hydrae's expression. You both have the same taste. Chuaning's eyes widened. Who has the same taste? He asked innocently. Hydrae pressed his lips together. Nothing. Just someone I used to know. He bought 3 sticky rice flour cakes. He watched, pensive as Chuaning took a bite, rising vapor blurring the child's face. The river of his memories crashed and surged around him. Hydrae sighed, letting his eyes fall shut. After a moment, he felt a sudden tug on his sleeve. He looked down to find that Chuaning had split one of the cakes into halves, the sweet and fragrant bean paste filling gently steaming in there. Half for Shizun, half for me. The bigger half is Shizun's. Why is the bigger half mine? You're taller than me, so you need to eat more. I didn't think it was possible to love Chuaning more than I already do, damn it. Anne looked on as Hydrae took half the cake and stood with Chuaning next to the pastry stall, eating and chatting. Beneath the bright Lenan sun, Moran stilled for a moment, and a smile stole across his face. His heart ached horribly, yet it also seemed to melt. No one, he thought, could feel anything but tender fondness towards this young Chuaning. He was the sweetest kid in the world. The sun-dappled streets of Lenan faded. This time, no other scene took its place. Moran heard Huajue speak in the darkness, his faraway voice like the whispers of a wandering spirit. I spent all my days with him, teaching him to read and write, schooling him in scripture and philosophy. But my main focus was his spiritual development. I never forgot that I had created this child in order to give him back to my Savior. Oh. I resolved to bring Chuaning to the ghost realm as soon as his spiritual powers and physical form were mature enough to withstand it. A pause. Huajue's voice was lower and graver when he continued. I would bring him to the ghost realm and fuse the remnant fragments of Chulan's soul into his body. Moran's mouth fell open. Oh, I don't know how I feel about that. Because Chuaning's becoming his own person. And that child. Oh. I could totally see young Moran splitting an osmanthus cake with wanting to. That's true. Thanks for that. A pause. Huajue's voice was lower and graver when he continued. Oh, okay, sorry, we read that. Moran's mouth fell open. Huajue's voice was hoarse. At the time, I never thought this would be wrong. What was Chuaning? He wasn't a real human. That hurts. He was just a piece of wood, a hand-carved figurine. I had given him life and taught him the ways of humankind, but ultimately the blood that flowed in his veins was not real blood, and the flesh that covered his bones was not real flesh. And yet we've seen him bleed so many times. Words Moran could no longer contain his mounting despair. That's not true, he cried. But what use were these words? Huajue couldn't hear his furious shout of denial. The monk's voice swirled about him, tugging him deeper into the maelstrom of pain. Chuaning was unnecessary. Okay. He wasn't alive. He didn't have a soul. No, that's not true. Why wouldn't the sacred tree have a soul? He's alive. He has his own souls. He isn't anyone else. He's not like anyone else. Moran howled, trapped within the illusion like a caged beast. Huajue, you raised him yourself. You watched him grow up. How could he not be human? How is he any different from you or me? I wish Chuaning could hear this. But Huajue continued murmuring, flat and effectless, as though he were chanting sutras before the Buddha. Who knew if his lips shaped the words out of true devotion or to numb the pain that laced through his own heart? He was merely a vessel, a carved for Chulan. He would only become a complete human with Chulan's souls inside him. I want to go back and reread Huairei's reaction to finding out that there were already 3 souls. Oh. Moran felt chilled to the bone. He had no idea what would come next. He felt like he was on the verge of losing his mind. He broke into a run, but there was nowhere to go, nothing but abysmal darkness. His repetitive murmurs became desperate shouts. No, you can't ruin him. Hydre, there are souls in his body. He's a living person, a human being. He fell to his knees, gripped by terror that far outweighed his fear of the past life coming to light. He was so afraid he might see Hydre bringing Chuaning to the ghost realm, cutting open his chest and merging Chulan's souls into his body. I mean, we did see a cut, and we know he has 4 souls, so it's not unlikely. That doesn't mean I have to like it. But what about the original Chuaning? The souls that had belonged to the sacred tree would be forced out. He was just a block of wood. As the wheel of karma spun on, where would he go? Whether to the heavens above or the nether world below, whether amidst the high clouds or down among the yellow springs, what place would take him in? No, Hydre, you can't. Moran was shaking, his lips bloodless. You can't. How could he not have a soul? How could he not be human? This child had skipped through the streets with a smile and a green lotus leaf on his head. He had carefully broken the flour cake in two and given the larger share to SHIZUN. I am not gonna frickin' cry about this. He was still so little, yet he was already more compassionate and spirited than many. He was no less alive than any other creature of flesh and blood. How could he not be human? But no matter how Moran begged and shouted, his words couldn't reach Hydre's ears. The debt Hydre thought he owed to Chushin's family had preoccupied him for 100 years. He had gone through countless trials to craft this vessel. How could he possibly let it go? Day by day, Chuaning grew. Since he was to be the instrument of Chulan's rebirth, I worried for his safety and health far more than I worried about my own. Other than the time I brought him to Linan for a few months when he was 5 or 6, he was never allowed to step outside Wu-Bei Temple. Really giving Mother Gothel vibes right now. Hydre heaved a sigh. Sometimes I wondered if I was depriving him of the sights and sounds of the world. Up until he was 14, he'd never been anywhere besides Linan. All he knew of the heaven and earth, the changing of the seasons, was from what he saw within the confines of the monastery. At last the illusion brightened again, to show a moonlit night. Moran saw Hydre standing in the doorway of a temple, gazing out into the courtyard. He hurried over. In the frosty moonlight, Moran saw the 14-year-old Chuaning practicing with his sword, hyacinth blossoms swirling around him. In his white robes, wreathed in a silver light and bright petals, he was an ethereal sight. Hydre went on, and his words mingled in Moran's ears with the sharp strokes of the sword through the air. But I also thought it might not be such a bad thing for him to know less. After all, the world was a cruel place. If the spirits of the sacred tree wouldn't live for much longer than a decade before Chulan replaced him, wouldn't it be a kindness if his life was easy and straightforward? If he remained oblivious to the mortal realm's sufferings? The dancing sword stilled, and fragmented flowers floated down. Oh, that's a nice alliteration. Calm and alert, Chuaning brought the blade behind his back and lifted his other hand, index and middle finger raised. He caught his breath and looked up. Upon seeing Hydre's eyes on him, he broke into a smile. The night wind tugged at the wisp of hair at his temple, tickling him. He tried to gently blow them off his face to no avail. At last, he reached up to brush them aside. Pitch-dark phoenix eyes curved into gentle crescents as he gazed at Huaizhui and Moran at his side. Shizun. Good work, Huaizhui nodded. Come, let me check the development of your spiritual core. Guilelessly, Chuaning walked over, brushing back his snow-white sleeve. He held his wrist out to Huaizhui. Huaizhui felt for his spiritual energy flow and said, "It's already very strong, just not very stable. Keep practicing. You can make much progress before winter." Chuaning grinned. "Thank you, Shizun." Moran couldn't be sure, but he thought he saw Huaizhui's shoulders tremble minutely at these words. Yet Huaizhui didn't say anything further. He neither explained nor amended his words. He merely turned and went back inside. Moran didn't move a muscle. He was no longer interested in following Huaizhui. He only wanted to watch Chuaning with a greedy hunger, with a desperate urgency. He only wanted to drink in the sight of this youth who might disappear at any moment. So pure and pristine, so kind and gentle. How could a child like this not have a soul? His gaze flicked down, landing by chance on Chuaning's chest as it rose and fell beneath his white lapels. Suddenly he remembered something. I think he just remembered the scar. It came like a clap of thunder, like a boulder landing on his chest, sending waves crashing to shore. No. He stumbled back a step. But what good was it? His memories had already extended their fearsome talons and pierced his steaming entrails. Steaming entrails? Oh, okay, sorry. My bad. Chuaning had a scar on his chest. His chest had been opened up. Moran was shaking. Before his eyes, Chuaning's sword danced beneath the moon, his footsteps light upon the flying flowers, a gallant sight. But Moran felt like he had swallowed a bucket of ice water in a gulp, his heart palpitating with chills. Chuaning's chest had been cut open. So Huaizhui had done it after all. He'd brought Chuaning to the ghost realm and fused Chulan's remnant souls in Chuaning's heart. So then, the original Chuaning was already long gone. So then, Moran brought his arms over his head, curling into a ball on the ground. He shuddered and didn't dare finish the thought. His heart hurt so much. He wished he could have been the one to have his heart carved out, to have his souls torn away. Chuaning. He was so good. Why did he have to suffer such a cruel fate? To be deemed less than human, to have his creator treat him as a lifeless empty shell, born for the sole purpose of sustaining the life of another. Who was the man Moran had chosen as a Shizun? Was he Chulan or Chuaning? Oh, you can't be asking that question, because I'm sure Chuaning is wondering that himself. You need to be the solid ground that he lands on after he attempts to recover from this. Moran felt his sanity slipping. His head throbbed painfully, and he felt dizzy and nauseated. He had no idea how long he sat there for. Eventually the sky dimmed. The monastery and the flowering tree disappeared. Chuaning too faded away. Huaizhui's voice flowed out of the darkness. After Chuaning turned 14, the time was ripe for my plan. I decided that at the end of the year, I would bring him to the ghost realm and merge him with Chulan's souls. And I'm pretty sure it didn't go as planned. Okay, just give me like 2 seconds to recover. She really is putting both Moran and Chuaning through their paces, my goodness. And like they have no break. Chapter 239, Resolve. Whose resolve are we talking about here? Moran listened, his chest hollow and numb. He had stopped yelling. Now he sat, staring vacantly ahead. It would have all gone according to plan if not for a severe heavenly rift that opened in the lower cultivation realm, Hydre explained. A great number of commoners became refugees, and the corpses of those who'd starved covered the land. Oh! The illusion lit up again, revealing the lead-grey sky of early winter, scattered snowflakes drifting down. A narrow mountain path revealed itself before Moran's eyes, dusted with fresh snow already marred with carriage tracks and hoofprints. One day, when we were coming back from collecting spiritual stones at the foot of the mountain, we unexpectedly came across a child on the verge of death from starvation. I think this is the moment that made Chuaning decide to abandon Wubai Temple. And yet the scar is still there, so that doesn't make sense. Moran watched woodenly as Chuan... Woodenly? Really? You went with that. You went with that one, okay. As Chuaning and Huadre appeared on the path. Chuaning wore a heavy cotton cloak to fend off the cold and carried a basket on his back filled with spiritual stones as he walked next to Huadre. Without warning, the youth stopped in his tracks. Shizun. He turned to peer at the overgrown hillside. Is that a person? Let's take a look. The two of them walked over. Chuaning parted the tall weeds with slender, pale fingers. Then he started in surprise, his eyes widening. It's a little boy. He turned to Hydre. Shizun, come take a look. What's wrong with him? What was wrong with him? Both Hydre and Moran could tell with a glance. The child was filthy and stinking, clad in flimsy rags so full of holes he wouldn't be able to put them on again if he took them off. Part of my brain just went, what if it was Moran? But I sincerely hope it's not, because I don't think I could take it right now. Even the dogs in the monastery subsisted on leftover scraps lived more comfortably. Subsisting on leftover scraps lived more comfortably. If not for the slow rise and fall of his chest and his soft groans, this child would hardly be different from a lump of rotting flesh. Nice image. What was wrong with him? What indeed? Time and again, humans were powerless in the face of the catastrophe. Children dying in such times was a given. It wasn't even uncommon for children to be eaten by others. I didn't know that. Only a youth like Chuaning, who had grown up in a monastery, could ask such a silly question with such trepidation. Marjorie frowned. Don't worry. Let me take a look at him. You go back first. Is Marjorie gonna kill him? Like, as like a mercy killing type thing? Chuaning trusted his Shizun, so he made to rise at once. But before he could step away, a grimy little hand grasped at the fabric of his cloak. Its grip was so weak, like a puppy's gentle nibble. He looked down to see a small, dirt-smudged face. The child's voice was as feeble as a mosquito's buzz, as if a soft clump of snow from the sky might crush him completely. Food. He froze, uncomprehending. What? Food. The child whimpered, the whites of his eyes the only spots of brightness in his sooty face. He brought shaking hands to his mouth in a pantomime of eating. Hungry, he mumbled. Oh no. Moran blinked, faint recognition lapping at the edges of his consciousness. But his brain was still numb. But his brain was still numb for the moment. He couldn't place the feeling. No. I asked one thing of Meat Bun. She's not doing this to me. He only knew that the scene was vaguely familiar, as though he had seen it before. He watched unblinkingly as Chuaning stalled within the illusion. His eyes went wide with shock as he finally understood what the child wanted. First he stared in helpless disbelief, then he hurriedly bent back down, distress struck on his face. This youth had only ever witnessed the beauty of the world. Never before had he seen a child reduced to skin and bones like a tiny, emaciated animal. The boy huddled in the snow-covered grass, wearing flimsy rags wearing flimsy rags of the cold cut right through. He tugged on Chuaning's cloak and said two things: food and hungry. Go back, Marjorie said, his voice sharp with warning. This time Chuaning didn't listen. His heart ached to see this grimy pup of a child. The constant references to, like, dog-related things makes me more and more convinced that this is Moran, and the fact that Moran seemed to recognize something or find something familiar is not helping this feeling. But obviously no spoilers. Shrugging off his cloak, he swiftly wrapped it around the boy. He seemed so distraught, as though he was not the starving child. As though he and not the starving child was the one in agony. Are you hungry? He asked. Hold on, I have some congee right here. He turned to ask Quadre for the container, but Quadre's brows were furrowed in a scowl. I told you to go back. This isn't your business. How is it not my business? Chuaning was taken aback. Look at him. Shizun, don't you see? He just wants something to eat. Otherwise he might starve and freeze to death. Chuaning was in near disbelief by this point. What's going on? He mumbled. I thought the world was supposed to be peaceful. How did he... Go back. Visibly shaken at Widray's attitude, Chuaning bit his lip, but he still insisted. I want to feed him some congee. Widray's drifting voice carried a rueful note, floating into Moran's ears like the wind-blown snow. I couldn't convince him otherwise, so I finally relented. I handed him the congee and allowed him to feed the child we'd stumbled across. At the time, I didn't know what emotions it was. At the time, I didn't know what emotions it would rouse in Chuaning or what decision it would inspire him to make. Back then, I knew nothing. Blankly, Moran watched as Chuaning opened the flask of congee and raised it to the child's mouth. The boy eagerly tipped his head, but he couldn't swallow it. He was close to death, yet no strength left. Moran's throat bobbed. It was as though a tiny spark in his mind nudged aside a layer of dirt. Suddenly, the scene seemed so familiar. It hit him all at once, like a great dragon rising from the waves, clouds of mist tumbling after it. He jumped to his feet, hands clenched into fists. He remembered. It was you? He rushed over to Chuaning in the illusion, pupils contracting. All along it was you? You were the one who... You... He couldn't continue. Throat stinging, he covered his eyes with his arm. He never would have imagined it had been Chuaning all along. Of course. Of course. Of course she couldn't just, not do this to us. A part of me low-key loves it, but I'm too hurt to appreciate it right now, okay? That starving, freezing child in the grass was none other than Moran himself. After he'd buried his mother and left the mass burial ground, he had nowhere to go and was forced to beg for food and shelter. The illusion overlapped with his memories. Moran had never forgotten the youth who'd wrapped his cloak around him on that snowy night. What's wrong? Chuaning asked anxiously. You can't drink it? Little Moran could muster no more than a tiny whimper as he looked at Chuaning with listless, heavy-lidded black eyes. I'll pour some out for you if you don't mind. Chuaning removed the lid of the flask and poured some porridge into his hand. Carefully he reached up, hesitant. Perhaps he thought it was unsanitary, or that the child would disdain drinking from his hand. His worries were baseless. This unsanitary? Between Linyi and Wubei Temple, Moran had drunk river water, rainwater, muddy dredges from a ditch. He had eaten wild berries and discarded food. At his most desperate, he had swallowed worms and ants and gulped down dirt. On the ground, Moran crouched on the ground. Moran leaned closer to drink the porridge. Those sips tasted like heavenly ambrosia, and the person whose palm he drank from was no less than a god. Slow down, there's more if you want it. Surprised and saddened, Chuaning looked at the child's filthy head lowered over his palms, lapping up the congee with so pathetically and greedily, his tongue curling like a baby animal drinking water. Where did you come from? Chuaning couldn't help asking, but Ryan could only whimper in response. They had finished all the congee save for the bits between Chuaning's fingers. The boy kept licking at his hand, straining for every last drop, the sensation ticklish and painful both. The tickle was in his palm, the pain was in his heart. Don't worry, there's more. Let me pour some more. Chuaning filled his palm with congee again, and Moran stared fixedly at him. As soon as Chuaning extended his hand, Moran's shuffled over, and noisily lapped up the porridge. Handful by handful, kneeling on the ground, Chuaning fed him the entire bottle of congee. Moran had never forgotten. Through all the tumultuous ups and downs that followed, he had wondered countless times what would have become of him if he hadn't crossed paths with this person. He entertained many possibilities, imagined many scenarios, but in the end, the answer was always he'd be dead. He'd have starved, or frozen, or been dragged away by wolves, torn open and devoured. If he hadn't come across this youth, he would be spending his days below the Yellow Springs with his mother. Much later, after Moran became Tashinjin, he had once made a trip to Rebirth Temple to look for his savior. But after so many years, Moran couldn't remember this young man's face. Faced with a courtyard full of gleaming bald heads, he felt only an itching annoyance. In the end, he turned and left with a wave of his hand. The abbot at the time had been deeply shaken. Baffled as to how Wu-Bei Temple might have offended Taishinjun, he anxiously waited for Moran to retaliate. But the next day, the emperor ordered thousands of boxes delivered to the temple. Upon opening them, the monks were greeted with a dazzling sight. The boxes were stuffed to the brim with gold. I mean, one thing that is consistent with his personality, despite the horrible person that he turned into in the previous lifetime, is the thing of, like, if you give me this, I will give you that times 1,000, basically. So this tracks. What hurts is how we know how much Moran ended up paying back Chuaning's kindness later on as Tashinjin. I mean, yeah. I do wonder what would happen to the Tashinjin of the alternate timeline, the one that is now plaguing us, if he knew that Chuaning had been that person all along. And at the same time, I dread him finding out, because I don't think it's gonna, like, I think it's gonna have an impact on him, but I don't think he is clear-headed enough, Tashinjin, to handle this revelation in any way that isn't gonna cause pain for Chuaning still. I feel like he will just want to possess Chuaning in a way that is not healthy, you know? In a different way than he's already done it in that timeline. Let me just see. Okay, yeah, we still have quite a bit to go in terms of this chapter, so I'm just gonna finish the page and then we will take the 10-minute break before coming back. His Majesty does not know the identity of his old benefactor, but in the interest of fairness, he sends 10,000 gold to each monk at Wu-Bei Temple as thanks for saving his life. So the savior he had searched for everywhere to no avail was the very man he had imprisoned in Sushan Peak and humiliated day and night. All those years ago, that youth had wrapped his warm cloak around Moran's frail body, and so many years later, as fate would have it, he carelessly ripped open the now grown youth's clothes. Time and again, he pinned him down between the sheets and dragged him into depravity. By day, he searched far and wide for his savior. By night, he unwittingly forced his savior to kneel between his legs, to bend his neck and lower his head, enduring all manner of degradation. I mean, could we pass some of that reflection on to the other versions of Moran? Because I feel like this one has had about enough. Like, I don't want him to stop growing as a person, but I just wish he wasn't being put through even more pain. Though I guess, to be fair, he put a lot of people through a lot more pain than just that. Okay. I'm just gonna take 10 minutes to recover. Though I don't know if it's gonna make much difference because we're just gonna go right back into emotion the second I get back, but we'll take what we can get. I will see you guys at 8-ish past. Okay, we are back. Hope the audio is still okay. Let me just lift this a little bit. Okay, so I worked it out and we might go a little bit over the 2 hours because I need to finish at least 40 pages during today's live stream so that we have 40 pages left next live stream. And my pacing, I generally like 40 pages is the most I can do in 2 hours, generally speaking. And we've been pausing a lot because of devastation, so we might need to go a little bit over the 2 hours, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. So again, for anyone who wants to follow along with their physical copy, we are on page 314. Um, sorry, correction, 315. Brown stared at the scene before him. Blood vessels spider webbing over his eyes. How could it have been you? In this lifetime, in these 2 lifetimes, his greatest fortune had been to meet Chuaning, and his greatest misfortune had been to wrong Chuaning. Such was their fate. Oh, I hate that. I hate that. Like, I love them, but why do you have to hurt me like that? I just, everything went dark again. All that remained was the cold wind whistling in his ears, and Huijue's distant, disembodied voice. I asked the child if he wanted to stay at Wubei Temple for a time, but he said he needed to go back to Xiangtan to repay a debt of kindness on his mother's behalf. Oh! I couldn't convince him to stay, so I sent him on his way with some food and money. He unsteadily made his way down the snowy slope. Wanning stood there watching the whole time until the child's figure disappeared in the blowing wind. Only then did he turn around to go back to the temple. When I took his hand, it was cold as ice. Huijie fell silent. When he continued, the sorrow in his voice was audible. After that day, Wanning asked me if he could go down the mountain to render aid to the commoners, but I refused each time. I berated him for allowing his conscience to be so easily swayed. Oh, how dare you have a conscience and want to do good and help people. Not very monk-like. As punishment, I sent him to Dragon Blood Mountain to reflect on his behavior, where he stayed for 164 days. Dragon Blood Mountain, that was the place that was mentioned in the letter Huijie sent Chuaning. At first, he asked me to let him go. Later, he stopped speaking to me. Perhaps he'd lost hope. Every day, for 164 days, I asked him what new understanding he had come to. I always hoped I might change his mind, but his answer was always the same. Marjorie sighed. As wispy as falling snow. I want to go into the world. You know what's frustrating about this is all I'm thinking is this child must be protected at all cost. And we know that he isn't. This youth had been taught that the practice of cultivation existed apart from the earthly world, but after witnessing one child's plight, Chuaning willingly dove into the straits of hardship. Eventually, he rebelled by burning all our scriptures. I feared something even worse would come to pass if we went on like this, so I released him from confinement. I thought I would find some other way to talk sense into him. In just one more year, when his spiritual core stabilized, I'd take him to the ghost realm and all of this would be over. Sure. Yeah, that's the way to talk about a person. Hydre paused. But unexpectedly, on that very night, Chuaning left without a word. All I found in the monastery was a letter. He wrote that despite the passage of so much time, he still felt deeply tormented whenever he thought of that starving child. He wished to travel on his own for 10 days. He thought I might detain him again, so he had left in the middle of the night. I was overcome with fury and anxiety as I held the letter in my hands, but there was nothing I could do. Hydre let out a long breath. I had no idea where he had gone. The illusion lit up once more, showing one of the courtyards in Wubei Temple. Chuaning had returned. He was covered head to toe in filth and blood, but his eyes were blazingly bright beneath the moonlight. His keenness was undeniable, like a celestial blade, painstakingly forged, unsheathed at last from its scabbard. Beautiful description. Hydre stood facing him, and neither of them spoke. In Moran's ears, Hydre's ponderous narration continued. 10 days later, he returned, just as he'd promised. I was secretly relieved he'd come to no harm, and figured I would just scold him before sending him to his room to rest. I wasn't ready for him to express himself so vehemently. Chuaning knelt and bent to the ground in long prostration. Hydre knitted his brows. What are you doing? Perhaps Shizun has remained in seclusion for too long, for the world outside is nothing like what you've described. This disciple sincerely asks that you descend the mountain and see for yourself. The mortal realm is a boundless sea of suffering. It's no longer the blissful paradise Shizun spoke of. I mean, was it ever? Ridiculous, Hydre roared. You know what you're saying? Chuaning thought once he described what he'd personally seen, surely his Shizun would no longer turn a blind eye. Hydre's... How on earth am I supposed to pronounce it? Diet? That's not right. D-I-A-T-E. Response. Oh, there we go. Okay, no, I missed an entire sentence. That's why there is not a word like what I was trying to figure out. Hydre's furious reaction was so unexpected he couldn't muster an immediate response. That's where. Okay. Fine. Shizun always told his disciple to partake of the sufferings and worries of others. He hesitated. Over these 10 days, I visited 23 villages in the upper and lower cultivation realms, and saw a great many terrible things. If Shizun went down the mountain to take a look, he would also... Hydre cut him off. Who gave you permission to leave the mountain? He shouted. Our temple here is isolated and pristine, and you have yet to master your cultivation and ascend. What makes you think you can come and go as you please and meddle in the affairs of mortals? Human suffering is age-old. It has no end. How could one little cultivator make a difference? How could you be so delusional? I mean, that's telling. The more Hydre yelled, the angrier he became, and the wider and rounder Chuaning's eyes grew. Chuaning watched his Shizun pace beneath the moon, sleeves flying, shouting at the top of his lungs, jabbing a sharp finger at Chuaning's nose. Under the dark shadows of the high-tongued tree, Hydrei's countenance was incoherent, fractured. Moran watched Chuaning's expression flicker from confusion to vulnerability, then to astonishment, to despair, before settling at last into grief. He closed his eyes as Hydrei asked, "Do you understand your mistakes?" Silence. "Speak!" This disciple, Chuaning paused. His voice was hard as steel. "Does not." I don't want to read that. Hydrei slapped him across the face. Impudent. I mean, I guess that's where Chuaning got to learn how to treat his disciples. Chuaning's cheek bloomed red, but he squared his shoulders and faced Hydrei once more. His eyes flashed with indignance. Sorry, I don't know why I'm struggling so much. His eyes flashed with indignant disbelief. "Shizun, you've always taught me to do the right thing and show compassion to others. Why is it that you're telling me to stand back and do nothing when a real crisis is before us?" "These aren't the same at all," Hydrei replied through gritted teeth. "If you left right now, what could you possibly do? You're talented, yes, but the evil in the world is like nothing you've imagined. What would be the point in leaving? To throw away the 14 years I've spent raising you? To martyr yourself on a momentary impulse?" His words rang harsh, like metal crashing to the ground. "Chuaning, you can't even save yourself. How can you save others?" I can't remember if we've seen the scene through Chuaning's memories before, like that specific sentence, or if this is something that Chuaning has said to Moran at one point. But this sentiment feels familiar. Oh no, I think Ta Jun said it to Chuaning at one point. Please let that not be the case, because that would just hurt way too much if something that Hydrei said at one point was reiterated by Ta Jun. Chuaning looked at his Shizun, gaze filled with sorrow and fury. He raised his chin, phoenix eyes misting over. Hydrei had likely never seen Chuaning so close to tears. That watery glimmer seemed to quench Hydrei's rage. He blinked, then said with some hesitation, "You, forget it. Did I hurt you?" But Moran knew Hydrei was mistaken. Chuaning wasn't hurt by the slap. He was hurt by the fact that the Shizun he had revered all his life could say something so at odds with the lofty image he had held in his heart. Chuaning slowly closed his eyes. After a moment, Moran heard a sentence he knew all too well. "If you don't know how to save others, how can you save yourself?" Hydrei froze. He looked like a wooden statue shoved in the corner of a shrine, perfectly stiff and immobile. "The plight of the common people is right before us," Chuaning said hoarsely. "But I don't understand how Shizun can sit up here with your eyes closed, waiting to ascend." Slowly, Chuaning got to his feet. His robes were no longer the pristine white they had been when he set out. They were stained with mud and blood. "Oh!" The subtext, my word. Oh yeah. YJ talked about it to the juniors when he went to running, used to say it to his disciples. Ah, okay. Thank you, because I was like, that's definitely familiar. YJ's temper fled. Eyes darkening, he snapped. You little ingrate. Do you have any idea what you're saying? I simply want to do as you've always taught me. Despite the combative set of his jaw, Chuaning was trembling, staring back at YJ with a wounded look in his eyes. You taught me everything. Your principles only exist on paper. There are a million refugees with nowhere to go, and orphans dying everywhere. Am I supposed to cultivate in Buddha? I'm not sure if we're back. I am fully confused. Sorry, let me see if I can change the settings around a little bit. Let's see if this makes a difference in the issue. Moran doesn't want us to hear any more of the trauma about his Shizun. Fair enough, honestly. I am not sure if this is gonna fix itself. Okay, this is quite painful. Let me see. Do I seem to be better? Is there a hope? Let me create a poll. Okay, there's a poll. Should we continue? That's the question. Okay, can if we do continue, can you guys tell me where did I lose you? um, I think did you guys hear us get to the point of there are millions of refugees with nowhere to go and orphans dying everywhere? Am I supposed to in Buddha's shadow instead of going out and doing what I can? Did you guys hear that part? Because I definitely read that part. But did you guys hear that part? Because I feel like that's where I started noticing the issues. Oh, I lost you guys way back when. That's great. As compassionate as you like, Huairui snarled, eyes bulging from his skull. Chuaning stared at Huairui as if seeing him for the first time. His chest heaved, his hands were balled into fists, and tumult swirled in his eyes. Moran thought he might spring forward, like a great dragon breaking through the waves, to grab Huairui by the throat and make him know the folly of his sins. I mean, the irony is he kind of like is already more or less at the point where he's like, oh, now you can start caring, and he's still not caring because now he has the excuse of, oh, now I have to take care of Chuaning before I can help others. I seem to be buffering again, but hopefully the audio isn't breaking up too much. But Chuaning only stood there, shoulders trembling. At last, the ends of his eyes stained red. He said in a ragged voice, Shizun, I don't cultivate so I can break free from the mortal realm. Is achieving immortality the sole purpose of cultivation? If that's the case, I'd rather fail. I'd rather give up. I'd rather go down in flames. I'd rather stay among the living, to give them everything I have, and die when I have no more strength in me. Oh damn. You know what hurts so much about it is the fact that he did that twice. Like, he actually followed through on his word. Not once, but twice. And he would do it a third time if Moran doesn't, like, save him. Oh damn. Sorry. Neither spoke. Shizun, go ahead and ascend. After I save as many people as possible, I'll follow you. Chuaning. Even in the illusion, Huaijui's towering rage was palpable. Ran had a vague feeling, a bone-deep dread that this would not end well. This wooden sculpture dared to oppose its life-giving creator. It didn't know its place. Huaijui's eyes were scarlet, suffused with a bloody gleam. There was no one to whom he could speak about his deep dismay, his fury and shame, the secret regrets buried for so long. Those emotions festered in his heart. Chuaning had reached the gate of the courtyard when Huaijui's chilling command rang out. Stop right there, you traitor. Chuaning compassion level 9000. Chuaning's ability to express that openly level 0. 100%, yes. Okay. Selfless. Great. That's the next chapter title, in case we weren't already an emotional wreck. And I don't think we're gonna be getting to those 40 pages, which I kind of don't have a choice, but also at the same time, this has been much more difficult to read through than I was anticipating, which is stupid. Like, why was I not anticipating that this would be trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma? That's meat bun in a nutshell. Okay. Chapter 240, Selfless. Huajui's outburst was like the tolling of a doomsday bell. Moran was overcome with a sense of foreboding. All the hair on his body stood on end, and his blood surged wildly through his veins. He had the panicked urge to flee this illusionscape, while simultaneously wishing he could rush into the past and throw himself in front of Chuaning to protect him. "No, Huajuai, you can't," he stuttered, but there was nothing he could do. All of this had already happened. He could only watch, scalp prickling, as a furrow appeared between Chuaning's sword-straight brows. Undaunted, he calmly met Huajui's eyes. "Run!" Moran blurted, unable to stop himself. "Run!" Chuaning had trusted Huajui his whole life. He had trusted the Shizun who raised him as a sacrificial offering. He trusted this father figure who had shown him kindness. Thus, even in his despair, he couldn't recognize the undisguised, killing intent in Huajui's eyes. I need another pillow. Moran stepped between them. He knew it was useless, but he couldn't bear to stand back and watch. "Please, run." But Chuaning didn't move. Back as straight as a pine tree. Thanks for that. He walked towards Huajui, step after unfaltering step. He came to a stop before his Shizun, his high ponytail fluttering behind him, and the wind blew his muddied robes into disarray. Huajui bit out each word between his teeth. "If you want to leave this temple, go ahead." "Shizun?" Chuaning's phoenix eyes widened. He didn't sense Huajui's menace. He mistook the executioner's sickle for a crescent moon in the window. Ow! That's just rude. I'm just collecting pillows at this point. Emotional support pillows for the win, yes. I apparently don't have enough. In that moment, he was even somewhat grateful, somewhat elated. He thought Huajui had come around at last. But the knife flashed cold, swinging down with murderous speed. "The moment you walk out of this courtyard, you will cease to be a member of Obey Temple. We have been master and disciple for 14 years. Going forward, we will have nothing to do with one another." Not me coming from Scumberland reading and thinking you're still reading it. Shizun brain rot. We can have multiple Shizuns in the Danmei universe and love each of them in their own way. It's fine. Oh goodness. I'm just like, what's hitting me And what I fear is being implied here is the fact of the moment that you're not part of Wu-Bei Temple anymore, I owe you nothing, which means I can just kill you without any emotional burden. Which I don't think that's how that works, but sure. We have been master and disciple for 14 years, but going forward we will have nothing to do with one another. Those phoenix eyes remained wide, but the joy in them slowly faded to astonishment and hurt. Chuaning hadn't thought Huajiwei would be so harsh. He stood, unmoving for a long time, before his lips parted. Beset by horror, Moran couldn't help softly reciting, "Please, please go. Leave right now. Stop talking and get out of here." In the end, despite opening his mouth, Chuaning couldn't string together any coherent thoughts. Huajiwei fixed his eyes on him. He was staking it all on Chuaning's attachment to him. For 14 years, they had been each other's sole companions. Severing his relationship with his teacher would be like running a knife through his own heart. Surely he wouldn't. Chuaning fell to his knees. Huajiwei froze. His mind snagged on one thought. Surely he wouldn't follow through. How could he be so stubborn? So uncompromising? I mean, those are the two adjectives to describe Chuaning through and through, besides compassionate. Chuaning pressed his forehead to the ground, once, twice. He counted 9 times before raising his face once more. His eyes were clear and bright, but his cheeks were wet with tears. The disciple Chuaning is grateful for SHIZUN'S care and teaching. From now on, he swallowed. What would follow? He didn't know. He couldn't continue. Huajiwei's figure shuddered in the blustering wind. His monk's vestments flapped chaotically, wide sleeves ballooning with cold air. His expression was grave and chilly, his lips drained of colour as he stared at the youth kneeling before him. No, not a youth. A block of wood. In the bin with you. We're just gonna soldier through. I can't. He'd carved him with his own hands, given him life with his own blood. He'd taught him with painstaking care and attention. He'd done so much, and waited for 14 long years, all to bring this vessel to the ghost realm as a container for Chulan's souls. Not to receive an earful of idealistic drivel about kindness and altruism. Hi. The irony is just smacking me in the face because, like, he's so guilt-ridden over what he did to Chushun, and yet someone who is the spitting image of Chushun, not just physically but also in terms of his values, his attitude towards life. He is willing to take that person and destroy them to alleviate his own guilt, not realizing that in a sense Chuaning was a second chance that he didn't a second chance in a way that he wasn't anticipating, and he's perfectly willing to ruin that second chance because it's not packaged in the way that he wanted it to be packaged. I don't know if I'm making sense. The audacity of this scrap of brushwood, this discarded kindling. Oh, the irony. I think it's intentional irony as well. Discarded kindling, flames of fury roared up in his chest. setting his eyes aglow and wreathing him in an incandescent heat. In this mood, Huadre was a terrifying sight. Moran bent over Chuaning, trying to put his arms around him, to shield him with his body, but he simply could not touch him. Chuaning remained on his knees, never flinching, stubborn in his principles, yet obedient in his remorse. As he looked at Huadre's twisted mien, his chest was warm with an inextinguishable passion. This youth existed entirely for the sake of others. He was only a piece of timber, an object without a soul. Can I cry? No, I really shouldn't though, cause like, I can't. Oh, sorry. That must not sound very pleasant. As he knelt on the ground, the only person he never spared a thought for was himself. Running. Rand's voice caught in his throat. He reached up to touch his face with fingers that passed right through. Please, I'm begging you. Go. Please go. There was a soft clang. The sound of metal striking the ground. Rand slowly turned his head. He spied a curved blade on the grey bricks. Hydre's knife. In the moonlight, the butcher's eyes. Damn. I mean, that's a choice descriptor. Let's try this again. In the moonlight, the butcher's eyes shone with a bloody gleam. He kicked the knife across the bricks. It clattered to a stop next to Chuaning's knees. No. Don't do this. Moran had lost his wits entirely. He scrambled to grab the blade, but it misted through his hand like a phantom. No matter how desperately he grasped at it, he couldn't move it. A slender hand reached out and closed around the knife. A slender hand reached out and closed around the knife Moran could not touch. Chuaning's shock had faded. His eyes were placid again. At the moment Huadre tossed the knife to the ground, even his anguish began to subside. Now he only looked relieved. If Shizun wants my life, I'll give it back, said Chuaning. If I must remain within the confines of these walls, there's no difference between living 14 years and living 140. Ow. But like, the more we're seeing of the illusion, the more I'm convinced that Chuaning has always been Chuaning. Like, this is the child that would become the Shizun we know now. There is no other signs of Chulan's original personality in it instead. Not that I can see right now. Okay. The look in Huadre's eyes was nothing like the monk's usual expression. In that moment, Moran saw the shadow of Xiaoman on his face. He saw that youth, on that rainy night in Nanan, on the eve of his betrayal. Chuaning, Ajay said, low and sinister. If you wish to sever ties between us, I won't ask you to stay, nor do I expect you to repay everything I've provided you these past 14 years. But you must give back what you've learned from me. Ajay narrowed his eyes. I will have your spiritual core. Despite everything that we've experienced in these books, like we are 7 volumes in, despite all the crappy people we've experienced in these books, this is the first time I want to reach into the book and slap someone. A cultivator's spiritual core was the most important source of their power. Even a person made from wood of the sacred tree was no different. As long as Huajue had a spiritual core, it was possible he could create another Chuaning. Oh, you disgusting. And the next time, he would make sure not to teach him about justice or principles. He wouldn't allow him to learn kindness or compassion. He wanted Chuaning's spiritual core. He wanted his beating heart. Oh, I thought it was just a block of wood. What block of wood would have a beating heart, you weirdo? The cognitive dissonance of this person is interesting. Chuaning looked at him for a span. A monk was chanting in the temple's main hall, his voice rising like incense smoke on the wind. Huizhui spoke in Moran's ears again. His next sentence seemed to sap all of his courage and strength. His voice sounded infinitely aged. As he looked up at me, I thought that perhaps when Buddha forgave the people who hurt him, he'd gazed upon them like this. He was showing compassion to his killer. The spirit put to the blade was showing compassion for the butcher covered in blood. I'm not going to be able to get this no out in the right way. We're just going to go. No, Moran screamed. The blade flashed, whistling through the air. Moran closed his eyes and hunched over on the ground. No. Blood spattered as flesh was parted from flesh. With a howl, Moran crawled over to Chuaning, shaking his head, sobbing bitterly. He tried to cover Chuaning's wound with insubstantial palms. He tried to staunch the blood with his own spiritual energy. It was useless. There was nothing he could do. He watched Chuaning endure the agony, casting a swift spell to stop himself from passing out. He watched Chuaning cut open his own chest, inch by inch with that knife. There was so much blood. Hot, scarlet, flowing blood. I'm just realizing, I don't know if I'm misremembering, but Chuaning didn't seem to be able to recall this. Like, he recalled maybe everything else around this incident, but he seems to have forgotten this moment. Because as far as I'm remembering, when asked about his scar, he said he didn't remember. It wasn't that he changed the subject or grew cold and didn't explain. I'm pretty sure he said something about not knowing where he got the scar. Interesting. You know, it's worse for me the fact that Huaizhui didn't have the guts to do this himself. He forced, well, not forced, but like in Afrikaans, there's a sentiment of vriendelijk verplig, like you're kindly forcing someone's hand, and it just adds another layer of grossness to Huaizhui as a person. How could he not be alive? What the knife plunged into was flesh, crimson, coppery, carved open flesh. How could he not be alive? How could he not be human? Huaizhui stood rooted to the spot, cruelty and malice etched into his face, but the light in his eyes was flickering, trembling, vacillating. Was this really what he wanted? Oh, of course, like, you could give us the happy moments, you could give us some of the beautiful moments, you could give us a steamy scene. No, you give us trauma in an illustration. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Gonna ignore. No, yeah, we're gonna ignore it and just keep reading, and then okay, no, let's just look at it, because it seems like this is the scene that's already happening and not something that is gonna keep happening. Let's hope. But it's beautiful, but painful. Like so many of these. The illusion wavered and blurred. Huaizhui's tumultuous emotions when he created the scroll manifested as the scene warped before Moran's eyes. He saw countless flashes of the past materializing out of the blood, each of them vivid, each of them gentle. He saw the 11 or 12-year-old Chuaning standing on the shores of Jincheng Lake, having just received Tianwen. 11 or 12? My man said I am gonna be a proper prodigy. But I don't think that was pronounced. Was that pronounced correctly? I'm overthinking it now. As he made to turn away, a high-tongued wood gudgeon with a curved tail rose on the lake's surface. The moment it broke the waters, Chuaning's figure began to glow softly, as though he and the instrument were reflecting each other's light. Baffled, he reached out to stroke the strings of the gudgeon. What's going on? 2 in 1 go, my damn. Huaizhui quickly surmised this gudgeon must also be made of wood from the Flame Emperor's sacred tree. They shared an origin and naturally resonated with one another. Surprise and excitement flitted across his face. This is most likely your fated holy weapon. My fated holy weapon? Once his gladness passed, Huaizhui's gaze became evasive. Indeed, some people are born with a special constitution that innately linked them with a holy weapon. Chuaning laughed. I have a special constitution? Huaizhui deftly sidestepped the question. He ran his fingers over the wood of Juga's body and sighed. You and this Guchen share a connection. You could probably summon it even without a spiritual call. It's linked to you by blood. Oh, sorry. I am a mess right now. Winning is catching spiritual weapons like Pokemon. Oh, thank you, I needed that. He only needs... What was the other one? I know we've seen all three of his weapons. I can't remember what the other one was. You and the Good Shin share a connection. You could probably summon it even without a spiritual core. It's linked to you by blood. That's why he was able to summon it um as a lost. Okay, okay, I appreciate that that's finally addressed. Oh my word. Oh, the sword, thank you. Moisha. The scene changed again. Moran saw two figures walking on the road outside Lannan. Hydre trailed behind Chuaning, exhorting him to slow down. He saw the he saw the steaming flour cake, saw Chuaning's smiling face through the mist. He saw Chuaning holding a palm leaf fan in an inn, diligently fanning Hydre as he sat in meditation. He saw Chuaning eating sweet as mantis lotus root for the first time, his syrup-sticky lips parting as he laughed in delight with Hydre. The scene settled at last on a lotus pond in the summer. The water was blanketed in an endless expanse of jade green, leaves dotted by brilliant pink and white blossoms. Red dragonflies zipped elegantly to and fro on the splendid evening. Oh, I need a colored illustration of that. Chuaning, no more than 5 or 6 at this point, sat cross-legged and grinning, imitating Hydre's posture. He watched he watched his Shizun with dark, shining eyes. Shizun, Shizun, let's play one more time. No more playing, said Hydre. I need to recite scriptures in the dining hall to soothe a departed friend. Can we play one more time before we go? Last time, I promise. The boy didn't wait for the monk to answer before rolling up the sleeves of his dusty green robes. As the blossoms swayed over the pond, he reached over and cheerfully poked at Hydre's reluctant hand. His youthful voice was sweet and clear, crisp as fresh lotus root. You're number 1, I'm number 1. Which flower blossoms on the pond? A lotus flower blossoms on the pond. You're number 2, I'm number 2. Which flower blossoms in bunches true? An elm tree blossoms in bunches true. Watching his smiling face, Hydre shook his head and reached over to cup Chuaning's hand to the beat of the child's game, smiling as well. You're number 9, I'm number 9. Which flowers fly in the wind? A dandelion flies in the wind. You're number 10, I'm number 10. Which flower has no leafy friends? Winter sweet has no leafy friends. I appreciate the translators. It's always hard to kind of like, in my opinion, to translate the vibe and also along with that the rhyme scheme of what I'm assuming is a rhyme in Chinese, and I think they did a good job. Blood drenched his robes like a rain-soaked red lotus. Damn it! In the courtyard, Hydre closed his eyes. He was just a broken fragment of wood. But bygone laughter tinkled in his ears. He was a body without a soul. Which flower blossoms on the pond? Haha, SHIZUN'S so silly. A lotus flower. Flower. I can't even speak anymore. A lotus flower blossoms on the pond. Duh. He was an empty vessel, a form he would offer to Chushan the tree that would secure Huaijui's salvation, one with a century of toil. He wasn't human. He didn't have a soul. Shizun, take half of the cake. The bigger one's for you. The smaller one's for me. Tears spilled from Huaijui's eyes. It's about frickin' time. He was shaking terribly, trembling with fright. He sprinted over to the child with the blade buried in his heart. His spiritual core already cracking, on the verge of being dug out. Huaijue knelt, howling in agony. He was the mirror of Moran. He was still trying and failing to put his arms around Chuaning. His sobs seemed to draw up tears of blood, as if the blade plunged not into Chuaning's chest, but into his own throat, into his very soul. How could this child not have a soul? He was the one who closed his eyes and refused to look, who sealed his ears and refused to listen. All along he had known. She has no chill. She has no chill. She does not care whether or not we die. Or dehydrate, for that matter. Okay. All along he had known, in his heart of hearts, he could tell, in Chuaning's smile, in his earnestness, in his tolerance and gentleness, in his obstinate perseverance, he had always had evidence of a soul. But because of Huaijui's selfishness, in the name of atonement, he'd feigned deafness. He'd numbed himself. Chuaning had never been a wooden sculpture, an empty shell. He was a person of flesh and blood, a human who laughed and cried. I had watched him grow up day by day since he was a child. He looked like Chilan when he was little, and like Chushun when he grew older. But I had never mistaken him for either of them. Huaijui's voice cracked like a broken gong. He was the one who gave me half of his cake, who tugged on my hand and called me Shizun. He was the one who sneaked over and fanned me on hot days, thinking I didn't notice. He was the one who kept me company for 14 years in Wubei Temple. He smiled at me and trusted me, and said I was the kindest Shizun in the whole world. As if swallowing bitter medicine, Huaijue muttered again. The kindest Shizun. In the illusion, Huaijue grabbed Chuaning's hand and severed the flow of the spiritual energy. The moment his spell was lifted, Chuaning fainted from the pain. Huaijue embraced that body, so full of life, bleeding profusely. It was as though he was holding Chushun from 200 years ago, after the heavenly rift opened above Linan, after he'd torn out his own heart to light the path of escape for his citizens. The mirroring of this and the fact that both of them was caused by the same person who still after 100 years did not actually learn his lesson until it was almost too late. But it was not the same. Chuaning was stubborn and prideful. He had 100 quirks that were uniquely his own. He didn't like to sleep under blankets, and when he was finished eating, he would bite down on his chopsticks and stare into space. He never liked doing laundry and would always shove all his clothes into one bucket to soak. These were all his habits, his idiosyncrasies. They were unlike anyone else's. The illusion went dark again. Moran didn't mind. If he had to look at the scene a moment longer, he would fear for his own sanity. I mean, I already do, but sure. Out of the darkness came Huajre's distant, rueful voice. Truthfully, the moment he frowned and told me he wanted to go down the mountain to aid others, that he didn't want to sit around and wait for ascendance, I knew he was a living human being. Well, too bad you made him stab himself in the heart before you believed him, before you actually made it matter. I was weak and selfish. I nearly destroyed the child I had raised myself. He wasn't Chulan, and he wasn't an offering for my redemption. He was Chuaning. He was Chuaning because I created him during a peaceful evening hour. As the temple bell tolled, he came to life beneath the dignified gazes of many gods and Buddhas. Thus I gave him his name. Yet this was the only thing I had given him. Because I had created him, I assumed he belonged to me. That I could use him for my own ends and sacrifice him if I wished. It wasn't until I saw him unhesitatingly slice into his own heart for the sake of his disciples, just like Chubongzi. Principles, sorry, I said disciples. Huajre's voice rattled with sobs. He could barely speak. Same, dude, same. After a long pause, he continued hoarsely. Only then did I finally realize I hadn't given him his souls or his life. Those were all his own. Because a weak, filthy sinner such as myself could never create a living being as pure and uncompromising as he. Never. How am I supposed to be okay? How? Like, I feel like a mess. I probably look like one, and it's not great, okay? We don't appreciate this torture. Okay. So I am supposed to be reading up until page 37. We're at 332/333, chapter 241, and I'm not gonna make it. We're stopping here because I am a mess. So I will see you guys on Friday for the rest, and we will probably be doing closer to 3 hours than 2. Oopsie, sorry. Just because we have to stop early today, and I have lost. Oh, there we go. Almost lost my bookmark. So I will see you guys on Friday. And I almost forgot to say bye because I'm so distraught. Sorry. 再见